Okay, so this is kind of I try to make it as simple as possible. There's obviously a lot of variations of things that can go on with water access and rights and all of that stuff. But I just tried to make it the stuff that we run across the most frequently in our
Hmm.
position.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Okay. Um, so basically, there's a bodies of water and public trust doctrine. Basically, boiled down, it says all public natural bodies of water are open for use to the public. So you can't say like, you know, this is my part of Lake Michigan or, stuff like that, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, so that applies to all um, bodies of water, with the exception of like a private lake for a subdivision or something like that. Or if it was like a landlocked lake that's surrounded by private land. So that would be kind of like what a subdivision lake would be like. Also something, I don't know, like a person's private lake or pond on their land would be obviously not in this public trust doctrine. So rights as they relate to water are called riparian rights. It means they have the right to use the water, protect the ownership up to the edge of the water, so like including beach. And then you have the right to construct structures that aid to access navigable depths. So that would be you have the ability to put in a pier or a wharf or whatever in order to use the water that you have ownership up to the water of. Um, so it's this riparian rights are the rights of the person that owns the property that abuts the water, essentially. There is a rule called the wet feet rule. So what it really means is people can use the waterways that are navigable waterways as long as their feet are able to be kept wet. So they're not supposed to go on to like your beach, for instance, or the owner's beach. They can use public beaches, but they could go as far as up to your beach in the water. As long as their feet can be kept wet, it can be utilized by the public. Um, there was a 2024 lawsuit that updated this to not include private property. What happened in that situation was there was a farmer who owned land that abutted a navigable waterway, and it flooded so badly that people were able to use like airboats to go across the top of it. So because it was shallow water, they could still utilize with that type of boat. And he was saying, well, they're on my property essentially. But they were saying, well, our feet are able to be kept wet. And so this did change the rule in 2024 that if it was a like previously land and becomes water, that is still protected as that person's property versus a navigable waterway that is able to be used for public use. Um, so we do run across this kind of a lot. Well, people will ask about piers and how long piers can be and the size of piers and that type of thing. So if a pier was built prior to 2012, it's grandfathered in. Unless for some reason it infringes on the neighbor's ability to use their portion of like their area. So if it kind of overlaps kind of where they can't get to their beach easily or whatever, or if it's detrimental to public interest, like, I don't know, it's got spikes everywhere or something. And that would be allowed to stay there even if it doesn't kind of meet current codes or current requirements, as it's grandfathered in. However, so anybody after 2012 needs a permit essentially to put in a pier. There would be no permit required if it's no more than 6 feet wide, no longer than needed for a boat lift. Each one is allowed two boat slips for 50 feet of water frontage. And then you get one additional slip with an additional 50 feet of frontage. So if you have 100 feet of frontage, you would be able to have three slips in that space. But if you wanted a fourth one, it would require that you have at least 50 more feet beyond that. So you'd need 150 feet minimally to have four slips. Boathouses is another thing that we do run across quite a bit. The basically old boathouses that are now below the ordinary high water mark, and were built before 1979 are essentially grandfathered in. They can be repaired or maintained as needed. But the it can't change the size of the boathouse, where the boathouse is located, or the configuration of the boathouse. So, like, you can't add like a living space above the boathouse or attached to the boathouse or whatever. If you wanted like a hangout area with a fridge or something, you can't add that to one of the older boathouses that are below the ordinary high water mark. But you can repair them and maintain them as needed. So it's very similar to like if you're trying to build onto a house that's close to the water, you have to build onto the existent structure. You can't make a larger structure. So it's very similar to that in that you have to keep the existent structure and you can only make repairs and maintenance that kind of fall within how it already looks and functions. Boathouses that are above the ordinary high water mark can only be repaired by 50% of the assessed value. It's a really hard thing to, I guess, monitor because there's really no way to know exactly how much somebody is spending on repairs. So it's hard for them to enforce. But obviously, if someone goes crazy with it and totally redoes the structure, they're going to know that it probably cost more than 50% the assessed value. And that can get you into trouble, number one. But the idea behind this rule of not being able to do 50% of assessed value is the hope is that these boathouses eventually go into disrepair and are removed because they don't want the boathouses there anymore, is basically what the point of that rule is. Um, and there are no new wet boathouses. So a wet boathouse is something that's like in the water, essentially, where you can just kind of pull the boat into the boathouse. Those are not allowed to be built anymore. So that's kind of the point of them. They just don't want them to exist anymore. You can have a boathouse, but it has to be 75 feet set back from structures and water. So it has to be 75 feet from this water, but then it also has to be 75 feet from any other structure that would be on their land. So house, whatever else, it has to be 75 feet from both. And then there was just a case recently, at the beginning of this year, actually, there was a man that was found guilty of trespassing. He was just walking along the beach, on like the Lake Michigan beach in Shorewood. But he was on dry sand, but he was on a person's privately owned, they owned up to the waterway. And he did get a fine for trespassing. So just be careful what you advertise when you are talking about, when you have a listing like walk along the beach, enjoy your, beautiful coffee walks, along the shoreline. Well, that might not be possible. So just be thoughtful of that when you're telling people what they can and can't do. If you're trying to paint the picture, uh, maybe don't necessarily use that exact verbiage. So this is just something because it happened just recently that I wanted to kind of bring to attention, because especially with Lake Michigan, I feel like people feel like a lot more of that is, you know, just public versus private. Um, the other thing people do have the ability to do along the lake, which I forgot to put in here, was anything that's up against a bluff, and this in this I applies mostly to Lake Michigan because there is an erosion factor there. But they are able to add like breakwater, or like stone to stop the erosion, but they can only do it on their portion of what's owned there. But they do have the ability to do that. They do have to get, kind of their plan approved, but they do have the ability to put things like like the breakwater or the stones to try and prevent erosion without a lot of hassle, unlike, trying to build some sort of structure. So that's kind of the gist of everything. There's obviously a lot that we could go into, but it gets kind of hairy and very specific to specific situations. So I just wanted to keep it simple. So you good, Justin?
Yep, I am.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. You're my best supporter.
All right. Try to be.
Yeah.
Do
All
you
right.
have 1 second? I have a question about something not related to riparian rights and water.
Sure.
So this is a situation with the deal. If earnest money has not been delivered and so my buyers are getting cold feet, and I'll say too, it's a flipper who doesn't have contingencies. Do you still deliver a camera in the instance that earnest money is not delivered?
Yes, because the cancellation is essentially what's actually canceling the deal. So you do need
Mm,
that signed regardless of if there's earnest money or not.
got it. Okay. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Yep. No problem. Amber, do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm good. I'm just listening in.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All
Yeah,
right.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'll talk to you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ashley.
Yeah, see ya.